Welcome to UGC E-Pathshala Postgraduate Learning in Food Science. I am Dr. Maria Margaret Joseph, Associate Professor, Department of Home Science, Women's Christian College, Chennai. In this module, today we are going to study the subjective evaluation of food quality. So we are going to look at the importance of subjective evaluation, what is subjective evaluation, and the process in which it can be conducted for different types of foods. So let us go into the different methods which are used for subjective evaluation of food analysis. Quality is the ultimate criterion of the desirability of any food product. Food quality can be evaluated by sensory and objective methods. What is sensory evaluation? When the quality of a food product is assessed by means of human sensory organs, the evaluation is said to be sensory or subjective or organoleptic. Every time food is eaten, a judgment is made. Sensory quality is a combination of different senses of perception coming into play in choosing and eating a food. It includes the appearance, flavor, and mouthfeel, which often decide the acceptance of a food. Even at home, when we prepare a food item, we often tend to evaluate the recipe based on how it looks, how it tastes, and it varies a lot among individuals in a home. And also we should bear in mind that these people are not trained for evaluating the product. But let us have a look at the professional way of analyzing the food product on the sensory lines of evaluation. The effective characteristic is not the property of the food, but the subject's reaction to the sensory qualities of foods. This reaction is highly conditioned by a variety of psychological and social factors, and in the final analysis, which plays a vital role in the acceptance and preference of foods. Let us go into detail and analyze each and every characteristic that is examined when we do the subjective analysis of the quality of a food. Appearance. The surface characteristics of food products add to the appearance. In fact, that adds about 70% of the quality of the product. A scrambled egg with a very dry surface is not acceptable. Fudge with a glossy surface is rated high. Many a times we human beings tend to judge everything the way it appears. Okay, but the famous saying goes, do not judge a book by its cover. But we are living in a very materialistic world, and therefore appearance does matter. Interior appearance can also be evaluated. For example, lumps in a pudding or gravy which are not desirable can be judged by the eye. Sight plays a role in the assessment of the lightness of foods like the bread, cakes, idli, etc. Transparency, opaqueness, turbidity, dullness, and gloss is mediated by the organs of sight. So you can make a cake with all the possible good ingredients, but if it does not look good, I'm sure more than 50% of the people will not give you a very high score on when they rate the cake. So the quality of fish, for example, can be ascertained by the brightness of the eyes of the fish. The quality of sweet limes can be found out by appearance. If the skin is thin, it is juicy. Infestation with insects can be found out in brinjal by the appearance of black spots on it. Completeness of cooking can be judged by appearance in products like meat and rice. We go on to the next aspect of color. In addition to giving pleasure, the color of food is associated with other attributes. Ripeness of fruits like banana, tomato, mango, guava, papaya and plum can be assessed by the color. So when I use the word apple, immediately you think of something bright and shining, a nice red look for a good appetizing apple. No one will think of an apple with a wrinkled skin or a dull looking apple or with a brown spot on it, right? So this is what we expect when we are looking at a food. So the very word of the food says it should have good quality. So it goes without saying that the appearance in terms of color also adds to the sensory aspect of a food. Color is used as an index to the quality of a number of foods. The strength of coffee and tea is judged in part by the color of the beverages. If I give you a blue colored coffee, for example, I don't know how many of us will even dare to sip it, right? So the smell, the color and the temperature of the coffee is already registered in our minds when we say the word coffee. So you just see how important it is to follow all these guidelines when we prepare a food product, especially for a professional outlet. The color of roast beef is used as an index to doneness. Doneness is whether it is cooked properly or not. Toast, dosa and chapati, which are too brown, are likely to be rejected in anticipation of scorched bitter taste. So if we find some black patches on a chapati, already the mind is telling you that is burnt, it's going to be bitter because of our past experience or whatever. So we might not even want to touch the chapati. I know of some children who are so particular about color, and if you say something white, it has to be white. Even off-white they will not accept. So similarly, if you have one or two black patches in a chapati, there are people or even children who will say it is burnt, I do not want it. So they at once attribute the taste to it and they will not even taste what you've made, even if it is stuffed with the best of nutritious food, methi or whatever. Next we go on to flavor. The flavor of food has three components, very important components. One is odor, taste and composite of sensations known as mouth feel. So let's deal with one at a time. Odor. A substance which produces odor must be volatile and the molecules of the substance must come in contact with receptors in the epithelium of the olfactory organ. Aroma is able to penetrate even beyond the visual range when comparatively volatile compounds are abundant, as in true with boiling sambar. So that aroma, when I say boiling sambar, already you are getting the aroma of a good sambar. The volatility of aromas is related to the temperature of the food. So the very word volatile says that there's something which is, probably sublimating from a liquid or a solid state into a gaseous form, which brings about the volatility aroma of the food. High temperatures tend to volatilize aromatic compounds, making them quite apparent for judging. Cool or cold temperatures inhibit volatilization. That is why we insist, it is generally insisted, that certain foods have to be served hot and certain have to be served cool, because it's only at that temperature you get the right taste, texture, mouthfeel and aroma. The next aspect is taste. We value food for its taste. The taste sensation which the taste buds register are categorized as sweet, salt, sour or bitter. Taste buds near the tip of the tongue are more sensitive to sweet and salt. Those on the sides of the tongue are sensitive to sour and near the back are more sensitive to the bitter taste. The sensation known as sour is associated with the hydrogen ions which are supplied by the acids like vinegar and those found naturally in fruits and vegetables. Salt taste is due to ions of salt. Sodium chloride is nothing but common salt and is said to be the only one with a pure salt sensation. If you think of all our preservatives which we have, they are also sodium based, and like Ajinomoto and a few other taste makers. And if you are really very sensitive with regard to taste, you will know the difference when Ajinomoto is added in a particular food or not. Basically, we add Ajinomoto is monosodium glutamate only to enhance the flavor, and mostly it's typical to add it to Chinese food. But sometimes in the local food industry, they add it to even the fast food, and every other person adds it to any and every dish, even a vegetable korma or a biryani, which both definitely do not need any taste enhancers, because the very ingredients they use, vegetables or non-vegetarian items, and the rice per se, gives the beautiful aroma and flavor to the food. Substances which elicit the sweet sensation are primarily organic compounds like alcohols and certain amino acids and aldehydes. Glycerol tastes mildly sweet. Sugars are the main sources of sweetness in food. Not all sugars are equally sweet. Fructose gives the most intense sweet sensation, followed by sucrose, glucose, maltose, galactose and lactose. Actually, a variety of these sugars in their different forms, alcoholic forms, are also being applied and used in the confectionery industry for the different textures and of sugars which are required to make different types of sweets, candies, or bonbons, or liquid glucose, liquid fructose. Each of them have a particular use in the confectionery industry. Sweetness appears to be associated with the hydroxyl radicals on the sugar molecules. The concentration required for identification is known as the threshold for the particular substance. For example, in a group of people, one person, if you say the word lime itself, they may have a face, make a face, because they do have a very low threshold probably, and they do not like any sour foods. But some people would just even eat orange if it is sour by the other person's standard. So that is how the threshold for taste varies from one person to the other. But this has to be identified before we really take people as judges on taste panels, depending on what food you are going to allow them to taste and probably rate. Individuals differ in their sensitivity to the 4 taste sensations, and the threshold for each of the primary taste is usually not at the same level for any one individual. The pleasant sensations in eating come more from odor than from the taste. Taste interaction. Foods contain mixture of substances which elicit all the 4 taste sensations. Salt in subthreshold concentrations reduces the tartness of acid. So now in this part of the module, we are going to see how different tastes can interact with each other and influence the final outcome of the taste. So salt in subthreshold concentration reduces the tartness of an acid. Some threshold concentrations of salt also increase the apparent sweetness of sucrose. The addition of salt to lime juice in common juices like sharbat, lassi, and to fruits like apple or guava improve the taste. I think many of us would have experienced this in our regular households, where we add a pinch of salt when we make any sweet dishes also, like kesari or even cake making. We add a pinch of salt, which enhances the flavor of the product. Conversely, acids in subthreshold concentration intensify the saltiness of common salt, that is sodium chloride. So it is easy to oversalt tart foods. Salt in subthreshold concentration reduces the saltiness of sodium chloride. So a pinch of sugar may improve vegetable soup that has been over salted. Sugar also reduces the sourness of acids and the bitterness of coffee. So this is how you can understand how one prominent taste, which is probably not required, is subdued by another taste. Like here in this case, it is the bitterness of coffee and with a pinch of sugar also. Temperature. Hot and cold sensations contribute to the composite flavor of a food like coffee, soup or ice cream. Taste sensations are less intense as the temperature of food is lowered below 20 degrees centigrade and raised above 30 degrees centigrade. Thus, really hot coffee is not so bitter as that which has cooled in the cup. Iced coffee is not so bitter as that which is warm but not really hot. Melted ice cream tastes unpleasantly sweet, although in the frozen state it is acceptable. I am sure all of you can say yes to this point. Many times when we attend weddings and you go to serve the ice cream, sometimes it is half or almost fully melted, and you really cannot eat it because of the excess of sugar taste which is in that. Whereas if it is served at the right temperature, we do not feel that much of the sweetness and the taste seems acceptable. Texture. The texture in ice cream depends upon the size of the crystals. How they feel on the tongue is characterized as coarse or fine. Coarse textured crystalline products are said to be grainy. Coming to this texture of products, everything depends on the quality of ingredients and the processing which it has undergone so that it will hold the right texture, consistency, and that in turn influences the flavor. The brittleness of food is another aspect of texture. Tissues in a raw vegetable and fruit are brittle or crunchy. The cells offer moderate resistance to fraction by the pressure of the teeth. Example, crispiness of apples and raw carrots. So when you make a salad and you're adding apples and also probably lettuce, it enhances the quality of the dish because you're giving a variety of flavor and a variety of nutrients, color, and possibly the most important, the variety of texture, where you have nice crispy crunchiness coming from some raw apples, carrots, and probably lettuce. So definitely all of this adds to the sensory quality of the dish. Tenderness in fruits and vegetables depends on how easily the cells separate. In meats, ease of separation of lean, that is without fat tissue, determines the tenderness. Tenderness in pastry is assessed by the ease with which the crisp crust breaks. So when we talk of pastries, here we are looking at probably puffs, which are the common pastries we have, though it has a lot of saturated fat and we're not supposed to have much of that too often. But when I say the word puff, we already think of the number of folds and how crispy and how nice and brown it is. You don't think of a soft puff which is probably burnt and black in color. So the crispness of the crust is very, very important for a food product. Ice creams may be too hard to too soft, which can be found out by the mouth feel. Gravies, sauces, and syrups range in consistency from thick to thin. The temperature may affect the consistency of food. Example, ghee, butter, cheese, and ice creams. So all of us know the different states in which we can see ghee. When you buy it in the market, you can have it in the solid, sometimes it is there in the liquid form, so it varies. But sometimes we are only worried about the taste, and the consistency is not of that importance when I am referring to ghee. The consistency of a soft custard, besides being thick or thin, may be smooth or curdled. So see, regarding items like soups and custards, we already have it, as I told you earlier, as a mindset how a soup should be. When I say clear soup, we know it is really clear and probably transparent. But if I say a regular thick creamy soup, then it should have some body with some thickener being used, but definitely without any lumps. So a smooth soup is what I am referring to. Cream soups may be smooth or lumpy. Gels may be rubbery or fragile, easily breakable. So different types of gels are there, and even in the confectionery industry, when we say gel, you have different tender, hard, and very hard also type of gel. But each type of food which uses this gel has a specification, and only that type of gel with that particular amount of tenderness should be present to actually qualify for that product. Particles of cooked cereals can be pasty or separate in grains. Astringency is another important factor. What is astringency? It is a dry pucker sensation believed to be due to precipitation of the proteins in the saliva. We know most of the foods have a protein component, and when this precipitates in the saliva, which is after it comes in contact in the mouth and in the mucous membrane lining of the mouth, this deprives them of the lubricating character. Astringent substances may also constrict the ducts leading from the salivary glands to the mouth. Some foods which talk of this quality will be unripe fruits like cashew fruit, wood apple, blueberry, gooseberry, etc. So the very word of these fruits already have started the reaction within your taste buds and in the mouth. Psychological factors. In addition to color, odor, taste and mouthfeel, certain psychological factors contribute to the acceptability of foods. Food is accepted when there is a pleasant association in all these factors. Sensory tests are well integrated with the overall plan of development of the product. Now we go on to seeing why these sensory tests are needed. We've seen earlier what are the aspects to be considered. Now we will see why this food quality testing is required. First objective is to know what the consumers prefer. So for a commercial product, they want to know what is the preference of the consumer, whether they want a gel, a fruit jelly, bright orange in color, or if you call it a grape jelly, they want it light purple in color. Do they want pieces of grapes in the jelly? So a good food product developer would first do a survey of the market among a large number of people to know what the consumer prefers. Consumer preference panels may consist of many things. One such thing is several hundred persons could actually form the panel, and the products are tested under ordinary conditions of use. They are not taken into a good AC room or something and then allowed them to taste. So nothing. Along the common conditions, they are given and allowed to rate the product. The results are considered to represent the taste of the significant portion of the population and are used to predict the market outlook for a product. Second point is the effect of variation in processing on the quality of the product. Tests are done to investigate the influence of factors in production. They should have the ability to distinguish among degrees of difference in flavor. The members of this type of panel are not required to be expert tasters of the product under investigation. Their highly developed ability to identify different tastes in similar products is the key quality required. Its purpose is to determine whether a given variation in processing has altered the quality of the flavor of the products. It is also used to test the effects of storage and packing on two items originally alike but subjected to different storage environment. So here we are looking at testing using trained people so that they could really identify minor differences in the processing procedure and therefore mark the difference and allow the process of quality control to go on. So the third reason for testing the food quality of a product is to see the presence of any off quality, off taste or off flavor that might be there in the food product. Now for this we need very trained panel of members. The sensory qualities, particularly the flavor attributes, are essentially to be measured subjectively. From early times, this judging has been the preserve of experts who used to evaluate tea, coffee and wine. With the development of sensory evaluation techniques on scientific guidelines, the experts are being replaced by panels whose sensitivity and consistency have been established by training and repeated tests. The panel members analyze food products through properly planned experiments, and their judgments are quantified by appropriate statistical analysis. There is a selection for the panel of judges. Actually, one extremely discriminating, painstaking and unbiased individual would suffice for tasting. Further, one individual may not be able to discriminate different aspects of food quality, hence a panel of judges may be used. Members of the panel should be carefully selected and trained to find out difference in specific quality characteristics between different stimuli and also direction and intensity of difference. There are certain requirements for an ideal panel member. He should be able to distinguish or discriminate easily between samples and should be able to distinguish appreciable differences in taste and smell. He should have good health. He should be experienced in the particular field. He should have high personal integrity, not be prejudiced, willingness to spend time for the sensory evaluation required. He should have interest. He should have ability to concentrate, derive proper conclusion. He should be available and willing to submit to periodic tests to get consistent results. There are different types of panels. I'll just list a few. You have trained panels, then you have which have laboratory testing being done for different types of products. You have discriminative and communicative or self-trained panels, and these are constituted of technical people and their families who are normally familiar with the qualities of different types of food, and normally 25 to 30 of them are used. Next you have the consumer panels. Such panels are made up of untrained people chosen at random from a cross section of the population and for which the product is intended. What is a testing laboratory? It consists of 5 separate units. It has a reception room where the panel members meet the person in charge and the samples are tested. It has a sample preparation rooms which is clean and well equipped for preparation and serving of samples. The entire testing laboratory should be air conditioned, free from noise and extraneous odors. Whenever samples with difference in colors are tested, color lights should be used to mask the color of the samples. And the equipment, the stainless steel glassware, etc. should be plain serving china and the most convenient as utensils, not very intricate and complicated. Samples should be prepared in from a homogeneous manner using standard procedures, and all the samples should be at the same temperature, optimum level, kept constant during the test. Samples are presented with 3 to 5 digit coding marking to obscure the identity of the samples. Then the techniques of smelling and tasting. There are certain professional techniques which are used to smell or taste a food. For odor tests of food products, a special technique is used to perceive the aroma more clearly. Smelling is done with short, rapid sequence of sniffs. Tasting of coffee or tea, for example, is done by slurping. The testing time, it should be done at a time when the panel members are fresh. The test time is generally between 10 and 12 in the morning. Too many samples should not be given as they may produce fatigue and lead to errors in the results. Experimental error can be minimized through the use of techniques of randomizing, and a statistical design is used in order to measure variables separately and together and to establish the significance of the results. Evaluation cards can also be employed, and this can be clearly typed or printed, and you should use simple terms, and the direction should be very clear for the person to use. The design of scorecards for sensory evaluation is challenging and difficult because the key characteristic of the product need to be evaluated on paper in a way that permits the judges to transmit the assessments of the samples accurately for the researcher. A score with no much details and clutter may discourage careful judgment. Too brief a form may fail to obtain sufficient information. A scorecard may be as simple as indicating which sample is different, as is done when duo, trio or triangle test is the mode being used. Table utilizing the hedonic rating scale ranging from unacceptable to very acceptable is relatively easy to conduct. No single scorecard fits all experiments. Instead, the scorecard needs to be developed for specific experiment. All scorecards should contain the date and the name of the judge. What are the basic different tests which we can use for food evaluation? They are grouped into 4 categories: difference tests, rating tests, sensitivity tests, and descriptive tests. Let us see each of these in detail. Under difference tests, you have the paired comparison test, where you have a panel member receiving several pairs of samples. These may be different or the same samples in each pair, and the samples are always given in code numbers. Different samples are given in each pair which differ in the intensity of one characteristic. Example, sweetness, bitterness or rancidity. In each pair, the sample with more or less intense taste will have to be picked out. Next, we have the duo-trio test. This test employs 3 samples, 2 identical and 1 different. The panel is first given one of the pair of identical samples as known as the reference, and the other 2 successively in random order. The triangle test, this test employs 3 samples, 2 identical and 1 different, presented at the same time to the judge. Judge is asked to determine which of the 3 is the odd sample. Next, we have the rating tests, and these give more quantitative data than difference tests and can be used for analysis of more than 2 samples at a time. Under this, you have a ranking test, and you have the other test is also known as a single sample monadic test, and you have 2 sample difference test, and you also have a multiple sample difference test, and you have a hedonic rating test, which we've discussed earlier, rated on whether it is satisfactory or good or extremely good. Then we have the numerical scoring test. 1 or more samples are presented to each panelist in random order according to a statistical design, and the panelist evaluates for the particular quality. Composite scoring test is a rating scale defined so that the specific characteristics of a product are rated separately. Sensitivity tests are done to assess the ability of an individual to detect different tastes, odors, feel, and the presence of specific factors like astringency or hotness. These tests are used to select and train panel members for evaluating the quality of products containing the spices, salt, sugar, etc. Something called a sensitivity threshold test. This test is to measure the ability of an individual to smell, taste or feel specific characteristics in foods or beverages. Also, they are used to establish the intensity of sensory response of a food or food components. Threshold tests will help us to determine through a series of sensations or judgments the stimulus detection threshold, which is one of the magnitude of a stimulus is measured at which a transition occurs from no sensation to sensation. Recognition identification threshold is the minimum concentration at which a stimulus is correctly identified. terminal saturation threshold is the magnitude of a stimulus above which there is no increase in the perceived intensity of the stimulus. So in this session, we have gone through at length the importance of conducting a sensory evaluation, and for what products and what are the different attributes one has to look for when evaluating a product. And also you've seen what is the use of doing the sensory evaluation. Mostly it's for commercial, but any product for that matter can be evaluated and should be evaluated for basically for marketing the product, and if you want to label it in terms of its composition and whatever else you want to value for the product. So it is really important that these sensory evaluations are developed to promote good quality food and good eating practices among the regular population. Thank you.